What is the worst thing you've ever done at work? One day I went to work. It was around 8:45 am. Got on the internet to do some literature search. Then my autopilot kicked in. I don't even know what happened. Next thing I recall is that it was 2 p.m. All the Reddit links on the top 600 hottest links were purple, and only reason I stopped was to check time because I was hungry. I got paid for the whole day and felt guilty. Went home, ate dinner, slept, and repeated again and again for the next 6 months. Killed a guy. Ran out in front of the train I was driving. He probably thought he has time to make it across the tracks. He didn't. Edit. I just want to say thanks for all the support. This accident happened about 4 years ago. I don't feel responsible for the accident, and I certainly don't blame myself for anything that happened, although I must admit that I suffered a few sleepless nights at first. But thanks to a great network of colleagues I soon realized that, like most of you have mentioned, it wasn't my fault. When I got my first summer job, I had a hard-ass manager who pointed out every minor detail about how the job should be done, and he did this repeatedly over the course of an entire summer, just drilling it into my head. Well, for some reason they liked me and wanted me to come back the following summer, and that manager didn't work there anymore, and the other summer workers was completely new. I was the only one who had been there before. So I actually positioned myself as the manager and ran operations for the entire summer, being just as picky as the previous manager. Funny story is that the regular staff, the ones that was there year round, didn't mind that I did this, and they came to me and said, "This guy isn't doing anything. Can you go and tell him to do his work?" I didn't even have to say anything. I just walked over there and he started working when I was around. They all flipped at the end of the summer when I revealed that I was just one amongst them and that I didn't ever had any authority over them. And I had been sending people home when they disappointed me, saying that I was going to dock their pay and stuff like that, which of course I couldn't do. TL. Doctor pretended to be the manager at my summer job. When I was younger, I worked at a home for deaf people with severe autism. There were 5 residents, and one of them was completely deaf and blind. Coupled with his autism, he didn't have a lot of pleasures in life other than wearing comfortable hats and necklaces. One of the workers there decided on a whim that it would be a good idea to buy him a very expensive stereo set with a top-of-the-line headset. There were attempts to get him to use it with the idea that he might like the feeling of the bass on his eardrums, but he never took a liking to it, and so it sat in his room year after year. I came back summer after summer, and every time I went in his room I just saw it lying there collecting dust. In a spur of the moment decision, I took the headset home with me. No one ever noticed or cared, but that doesn't change the fact that I stole from a blind deaf autistic man with epilepsy and, at the time, a broken jaw. TL. Doctor stole from a blind deaf autistic man that was in my care. One of the workers there decided on a whim that it would be a good idea to buy him a very expensive stereo set, so was the stereo bought with the money of the resident, or did the home buy it? It seems very wrong that one of the workers can decide to buy expensive stuff with the residents' money without their consent. At work we communicate through Skype. There was a coworker I kinda flirted with. We would ask each other questions, and the other person had to answer honestly. I asked the guy whether he had Chester, but instead of sending it to him, I sent it to my boss. Fortunately my boss laughed it off and told me to go back to work. I still cringe at the memory. That's like the time I was Google chatting with my wife and told her that the dress makes her cleavage pop out like crazy. Except I had accidentally clicked my boss's name and sent the message to her instead. Almost immediately she turns around and says, What?" Awkward conversation ensued, but we all got a good joke out of it. Worst thing I ever did, ever in my life, was when I worked at a cafe. I was running out orders and bussing tables, and I was just learning how to hold the tray properly with my left hand. So I get an order, 1 cappuccino, 1 strawberry milkshake, for a mother and her little girl. As I get to their table, I put the coffee in front of the woman, then unbalance the tray and accidentally spill the milkshake all over this 7-year-old kid. It was her birthday and they were her new clothes and shoes. Man, even her feet were just swimming in milkshake. Horrifying. TL. Doctor accidentally poured milkshake all over a kid on her birthday. I actually feel bad for this. When I was between 14 and 16 years old, I worked at a mom and pop supermarket. Started as bagger, then got to be a cashier, then moved up to porter stock boy. When I started being a stock boy, one of the things I would stock was the cigarette shelf. This was the early mid-90s, so the shelves were easily accessible to everyone and constantly being filled. When I would stock the shelves, I would leave a carton or two in the big bulk boxes I was taking them out of. Then, at the end of the night, I would bring the cartons I didn't stock out to my bike or car. When I got older, I would bring the cartons to school and sell them for about $20 a pop. Wound up making a cool extra $100 a week or so by doing this, which is huge for a young teenager in the mid-90s. Years later, looking back on it from my 30s, I feel bad about it. I wasn't stealing from a big corporation. I was stealing from a guy with a family and kids who ran a small business. On top of it, he was a really great guy. Hindsight. My family owned a convenience store for 22 years and I used to work there. Trust me, he knew. When 425 cigarettes cartons are missing every week, it's obvious what's going on. Your boss wasn't a great guy, he was an amazing one. Do the right thing and repay with interests. I worked in a facility where we tested wafers of semiconductors. For some of the wafers, the process was test on a machine, put the wafers in an oven for a period of time, test on a machine again, then the wafers would go out to be cut and used. The wafers would come to me, post-testing, in a plastic carrier that had 12 slots. The carrier was in a box with a latch. So I would open the box, put the carrier on a machine. That would transfer the wafers from the plastic carrier to a metal one. Then the metal carrier goes in the oven. No problem. One day, my supervisor comes to me with a carrier with 3 brand new prototype wafers in it. No box. He says, these have to go in the oven immediately. So I put them in the oven immediately. Since I didn't have the box to open, my routine was broken, and I did not transfer the wafers to a metal carrier. Hey, man, do you smell that? The plastic carrier melted in the oven and adhered very well to the silicon wafers, which then cracked in many places. All of this rendered the fancy new super high priority wafers totally useless. TL. Doctor, I'm such a creature of habit that when my process didn't start the way I expected to, I blew $1.2 million in under 2 hours. Wrote and published 2 books on company time. I was an extremely dedicated and hard-working individual in an engineering environment. I achieved 19 patents among other accomplishments. In 1999 my son died in a terrible accident, cold case. I was an exemplary employee through the traumatic experience. At performance review time I received low marks as usual. The company needed to save money. When I pressed my boss for reasons for the low marks, he beat around the bush. I continued pressing. He said, because you had that funeral. The uncompassionate reasoning blew my mind. I decided then and there to contribute as minimally as possible to his success. He may have been the college-educated boss, but that did not make him the smarter of the two of us. I still miss my son. I still wish my boss minimal success when I think about how cruel people can sometimes be. Now happily retired. Life is good. I dropped a brain. Actually, if I'm being honest, I dropped 2. Edit. For those of you who are asking, I'm a neuroscientist. The brains were for research purposes. They were also mice brains, and anyone who owns a mouse knows how wiggly they can be. While working at a national accounting firm of 2,000 plus employees, I emailed a picture of a kitten to the CEO, every partner head honcho I knew, and my co-workers late at night. Alcohol was involved. No one ever reprimanded me. I left the firm for other reasons, but from what I hear, people still talk about it. I used to work at a Walmart distribution center. One day we were unloading a truck full of TVs. This was pretty hard, slow work loading them onto metal pallets. About mid-morning my manager comes over and says, "Jfinag one, we get paid for quantity not quality, and load these things faster." That day I probably broke at least 50 TVs throwing them from the truck onto the pallet. I kinda felt like I was sticking it to the man every time the pallet rail would bust through the front of the TV box and obvious go straight through the screen. I was working at an extremely busy gas station with a line out the door. The woman came in going right to the front asking for directions. I said I would be glad to help her, but let me get through these paying customers first. I was the only one there, and this is before Google Maps. Well, she would not stop yelling about it and interrupting. So finally I asked where she was going. She said the name of a mall that was literally down the street. I gave her directions to another mall 20 minutes away. All the customers watched and listened to me give these wrong directions. When she was in her car driving away, the 10 or so customers I had in the store gave me a resounding applause. I towed a car before Thanksgiving break and the girl showed up as the tow truck was leaving crying her eyes out because she couldn't afford to pay out the car and wouldn't be able to go home for the holidays. Pretty sure I could have killed a puppy and felt less bad. As a young research chemist, I dumped a significant amount of sodium cyanide into an organic waste container that sat out in the lab. Our lab's organic waste was usually acidic and was at the time, which caused cyanide gas fill the lab. Thankfully cyanide gas isn't as toxic as people think, and it was caught early by an attentive postdoc with a good sense of smell. TLDR. Almost killed myself and all my co-workers with cyanide gas. Worked as a bartender 4 years. 2 of the hotter girls that I worked with that had the night off came in a little tipsy and had a few drinks. They both went to the bathroom, and before they went in motioned me to come over. They took me into the men's handicapped stall and double teamed me. To this day, the coolest thing to ever happen to me spontaneously. Definitely the worst and best thing I've ever done at work.